Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the Program Support Application Workshop. This is the fourth workshop that we're holding. And just so you know, this session will be recorded. So in case you missed something or if you wanted to send the application workshop to a coworker, then this session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So you'll have the opportunity to do that once they're loaded, and we'll send you all a link to not only program support, but also general operating support in case you were interested in learning more about that program. So my name is Erica Mohan. I'm the Grants Management Specialist here at the Broward Cultural Division. Just some housekeeping rules. If you have not placed yourself on mute, please do so. If I have muted you, then you may not have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask questions towards the end of the workshop. And also, just so you know, we have a new feature on WebEx. It's called WebEx Assistant. So if you need closed captions, we have that accommodation for you. And I'm happy to send a transcript of the meeting if anyone needs it afterwards. And so James Shermer, our grants administrator, will be taking over. So you can take it from here, Jim. Okay. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Before we get started, just a quick thank you to our director, Phil Dunlap, and also a thanks to the Grants Task Force Committee that worked over the summer with the reform and redesign of our various different grant programs. They worked very hard these past few months and making all these changes that ultimately had to go for approval for the county commission. So again, thanks to everyone who worked on this. This is a copy of the organizational grant manual, which is on our website, and this contains both the general operating support program and the program support funding program, but this evening we're going to be speaking specifically about program support. So the manual has some introductory information and some background about the Cultural Council. If you're not familiar, we report to a board of directors, which is the Broward Cultural Council. These are mostly members who have been appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. And they're the ones who we report to in terms of making funding decisions and approval. Some history of the organization. These pages deal mostly with the operating program, but if you keep going here, page 5, this is the information regarding the program support category. So briefly, this program category provides project-based support to arts and culture organizations and non-arts, not-for-profit organizations in the production and presentation of high-quality artistic activities. These ongoing and one-time projects broaden and deepen audience participation and increase access to the arts for visitors and residents throughout Broward County. Now, please note, if you're a first-time applicant to any of our funding programs, this will be the category that you'll start in. So, and then after establishing a 3-year track record with us, then we can start looking at you for eligibility into the operating support category. The program support funded projects must meet the following conditions. So a project may consist of one or more specific events or activities. It may be part of or all of an applicant's regular season or activities. Applicants that undertake a single short-term project in a year, that could be, say, a 10-day festival, for example, but you could apply for an event, or you could identify, say, a certain component, such as a presentation of a key artist or an associated activity as the fundable project. Projects may be new or untested or ongoing with proven track records. Projects do not need to be large. The division welcomes small-scale projects that can make a difference in the community or artistic field. and projects may cover a broad range of singular or multiple artistic disciplines. Program support awards, these are organizations can apply for funding in 3 different grant tiers. Now, one of the changes from previous project funding categories is that there are 3 levels now of support that you can apply to, or 3 tiers. There's a $15,000 category, a $10,000 category, and a $5,000 category. And the grant tiers are based on an overall program or project cost and do require a minimum of a 1-to-1 cash match. Now, for the $5,000 category, there is no specific match requirement. And I'll talk further about the match requirements and the implication of the score and how that plays out. But as you're thinking about the design of your project or the scale of the project, keep in mind that if your project expenses are about $30,000, then you can apply for a $15,000 grant. And if the project is in the $20,000 level or more, you can apply for a minimum of a $10,000 grant. And keep in mind, if an applicant has received a cultural division grant in the past but has not met the required program expenses or income to be eligible in the grant tier for which you were awarded, the division may restrict which grant tier the applicant can apply in the future. So be thoughtful about or the scale of the project that you're proposing to us. Now, 2 of the 3 project support grant awards, that 15 and 10 category, do require a minimum of a 1-to-1 cash match. And the match must be maintained, the required program cost for that grant tier. Matching funds can come from other cash revenue sources such as your own funds, general revenue, other public or private funding, board or corporate contributions, or earned revenue. So an organization receives an award of maximum eligible funding at 100%. So in other words, if your score is very high, then the match is 1-to-1. But I'll show you in a minute, if the score starts to lower, then the minimum eligibility funding level at 50%, the ratio of funding increases. So this is a change from previous grant project funding where it was directly 1-to-1. There is an inverse relationship now to the score and ultimately what the match requirement will be. So let me show you what that means here in this chart. So the other change is that we're no longer using a 100-point rating scale. So the gradation is not 75 points or higher for passing. The rating system is a 1-to-4 ranking. So if you score high, say a 4, and you qualify, say, for the $15,000 award, then the match requirement will be 15. It's your $30,000 project. But notice as the grading lowers or the score goes downward, then the percent of eligible funding also decreases, but then the match then increases. So the quality of the proposal is rather critical because it has implications as to how much match you're going to have to provide. So the eligibility for this program is you have to meet the following requirements. A nonprofit, tax-exempt status and good status as a not-for-profit corporation with the state of Florida. So please make sure your SunBiz filing with the State Division of Corporations is up to date, and you also must be a 501c3 tax-exempt status or have been designated by that from the IRS. Also, applicants in this category can be federal or local government entities or municipalities. So some of you on the phone, if you're calling in from cities that are in Broward County, you might have applied in the past to the cultural tourism program or the cultural festival program, municipalities, this is the category that you'll be applying in. Corporate address in Broward County, and then the other change, those of you who are on the phone that were previously funded through the Regional Investment Program, regional organizations where the incorporation was in a different county, it will be in this category that you'll be applying. Regional organizations that, again, have at least a 3-year history of providing programs in the county. The local focus is arts and programs and projects that do occur in this county. The grant cycle, arts programs and projects must occur during the applicable grant cycle. So for this grant, which is FY22, the grant period will be October of 21 through September 30th of FY 2022. And unlike the Creative Investment Program, where there were multiple grant cycles, there's only but one grant cycle now for program support. So this will be your only one and only opportunity to apply for next year. The proposed program's primary purpose must be the creation or utilization of arts and culture, and the Cultural Division funds ongoing programs and projects. The division defines a program as a specific identifiable project, event, or event series that has a distinct and consistent focus, format, and objective. Programs and projects may be large or small, existing or new, ongoing or one-time events. They may take place in a publicly accessible venue in Broward County. Now, it is important as you identify the venues or the potential venues that you'll be hosting these events that they're ADA compliant. So you'll need to check to make certain that the venue is ADA accessible. And then an organization may submit only but one application per grant cycle. And again, first-time applicants to the division who are eligible to apply will be applying only but for the $5,000 grant tier, regardless of budget size. A few words about funding restrictions, things that we do not fund. Again, we do not fund programs or projects or events that are not accessible to the public. So we don't fund private functions or events where the general public cannot access. So keep in mind that you're designing something that citizens can attend or participate or enjoy. We do not fund grants to individuals in this category. There is yet another different grant category, artist support category, which we'll be talking about later this spring. So if any of you are artists that are on the phone this evening, this may not be the most best fit for you right now, but there is a different grant program for individual artists, which will be hosting a workshop later this spring. We do not fund educational institutions, including schools, excuse me, child care centers, colleges, and universities are not eligible to apply. Now, there could be organizations that are closely affiliated with such institutions, but we encourage you to contact us to determine the eligibility and if in fact you should be applying. Projects for which the selection of artists or artworks is based upon criteria other than artistic excellence or merit. So be mindful that there might be festivals or exhibitions or publications or performances for which there's no jury, audition, curatorial judgment that has been applied. One of the key questions in the application is we're asking about who makes the curatorial decisions, or how is your program configured, or what is the artistic philosophy that supports the decision in terms of how you're delivering the program. And if that's not evident, then there may not be a good fit. We do not fund benefits or fundraisers or award programs. We do not fund organizations whose cultural programs in whole or in part are designed to encourage the preference of a particular religion, We do not fund political advocacy. This particular grant program does not fund construction or the purchase or restoration of facilities. So there will be another construction grant program which will be coming back online probably in about a year or maybe two once the TTT funding level begins to increase. If you recall, there was a tourist development tax construction grant category which we have run for a number of years, and that's on hiatus at the moment until the bed tax collection begins to increase again. So construction is not this particular grant program. You'll probably see it in a different funding program in about another year. We do not fund cash reserves or endowments. The grant cannot be used to erase deficits or remediate debt reduction. And the grant cannot be used for tuition assistance or scholarships. Now, some organizations like to talk about, that they have scholarship programs and do certain things for students, and that's very commendable, but keep in mind that the grant cannot be used for these purposes. And grant funds should not be used for costs of receptions or social activities, except where there might be an incidental or related nature to the arts activity. Now, later in the manual, which I invite you to explore, is that there's some definitions relating to costs about budget, both expense and income, which will help you categorize your budget presentation to us. And I'll show you where that is later. So there are three broad criteria that your application will be judged. The first one is artistic merit and quality of programs. The panel will be looking at the quality of the artists, arts organizations, arts education providers, works of art, or services the project will involve as appropriate. Artistic significance of the project and importance of the project to the artistic field, artist, audience, community, and/or constituency. A demonstrated commitment to recruit, engage, and directly compensate qualified and experienced artists. Distinctive and unique programming that enriches cultural offerings and/or preserves cultural traditions of the county. You'll be demonstrating that you have a loyal audience base evidenced by attendance numbers, community support, and/or ticket sales. And an ongoing commitment to program planning and development best practices, including goal setting, marketing, budgeting, and evaluation. So there are some questions in the application that deal with goals and objectives and marketing strategy and metrics in terms of evaluation. The second broad artistic or other criteria category is community benefit. So you'll be demonstrating a commitment to community engagement. Some of you might remember this criteria. We called it once before, I think, civic engagement. So your program uses community knowledge and relationships to make informed and relevant programming decisions. Demonstrated in intentional efforts to attract and retain diverse audiences and increase access to the arts to underserved individuals or under-resourced neighborhoods. Demonstrated efforts to contribute to the vibrancy, safety, and economic vitality of neighborhoods and communities or the entire county. The third broad criteria, organizational capacity. The quality and clarity of the project goals and its design, the resources involved, and the qualifications of the program, or rather project staff and volunteers. You'll be demonstrating an engaged and diverse board of directors that contributes financially to the organization. A project budget that is realistic, appropriate to the scope of the project, and reflects the diversity of funding, or rather it reflects the diversity of funding sources. A history of successful arts and cultural programming, a demonstration of short and long-term planning. We've always in the past asked for a planning document. And appropriate marketing efforts given the program size and scale. And then effective management of past cultural grants. So this is a quick summary of kind of the timeline. This is our second series of workshops here in January. We did some earlier in December. If you're new to us this evening, if you've never applied before, there will be an eligibility step that we need to complete with you on or before the 5th of February. So we need to understand if you're making an application or have never made any request for funding, we do like to do a intake, if you will, or what we call a determination of eligibility, to make certain that this, in fact, is the right program for you. And if not, we might recommend a different one. The deadline for this program is March 26th. And the way that this program will be structured is that depending on the category of funding level that you'll be requesting, then we're going to be co-locating or clustering the applicants by funding or request size. And there'll be a separate panel for each of these groupings. So there'll be a separate grant review panel for those who are applying at the 15K level. That'll be April 28th. Those of you who are coming in at the 10K level, the panel will be on May 4th. And those that are applying for 5,000, the panel review will be May 20th. And once we conclude the third panel, all of the panel's recommendations will then be forwarded on to the Broward Cultural Council for their approval sometime during the June or summer meetings. And this, amongst all the other grant panel decisions, will be moved forward to the Broward Board of County Commissioners during the budget hearing process for their final approval. Keep in mind that the panel's only role is to make recommendations. So a brief word again about the rating system. I mentioned this earlier, that we're no longer relying on a 100-point grade or scale to review the applications. It's a 1 to 4 ranking system. And then there's gradations within each of these. So 3 plus, 3, 3 minus, 2, 2 plus, 2 minus, etc. So if an organization receives, shall we say, a 4, it's considered a model organization. And in other words, it meets all the review criteria in an exemplary fashion. So ratings of a 4 is considered rather rare. Organizations that receive a rating of 3, for example, are considered good, but some development is needed or some improvement. And then the applicants who receive a rating of 2 are considered in need of some improvement in multiple areas and may be marginally considered fundable. So depending on the availability of funds, because there's not an unlimited pool of resources, if the score begins to fall in the 2 minus range, there may be some jeopardy in terms of not being able to recommend funding, or there may not be resources available. And then organizations that do receive a rating of 1 do not meet the division's criteria, and then they will not be recommended for funding. So it is a competitive application process. So regardless of ratings received, funding is not guaranteed, and awarded funding may vary for returning applicants from year to year, because there's obviously changes in the funds available within the county from year to year. So on a funds available basis, in other words. And it's driven by the number of applicants in the pool, the total funds that are requested, and the ratings each individual applicant receives in relation to one another. So review those criteria carefully, because this is where you're going to be responding to. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay. All right, so there's some other handy information in the manual. We'll talk about navigating the application and onboarding in a minute. These are some definitions of demography that might help you in defining your audience. And as I mentioned earlier, there's some guidance as to definitions of both revenue and expense categories. So as you're assembling your budget form, this will help you categorize each of those sections. Support materials, the grant portal can handle a variety of different file extensions, obviously Word, PDF, Excel. But in the application you're supplying us, you're providing medium and media as part of your submission. So things like MP2, MP3, MP4, audio files, small movies, .mov are fine. But please keep some of those media files small. So, movies, maybe 2-3 minutes are fine. Sample images and things, 5 pages. When we do this, you have to consider the reader, consider the reviewers, because they're going to be moving through a lot of material. So, this is the time to start thinking about how to edit or develop your support materials and files. I do suggest making new materials or new files because sometimes older PDF files, the file might be damaged or corrupted or broken like that. So make sure that your files are fresh and that they actually do work when you open them up. Okay, so just some advice about materials. So let's take a moment and go to another resource here. Okay. So this is kind of a Cliff Notes version of the manual, but there's some key points I wanted to just bring to everyone's attention. It's a handy chart of dates and deadlines. We're going to be orienting panels soon. This is going to be citizen review panel. There will be a member of the Cultural Council, and the bulk of the panel will be volunteers or citizens or community members. Now, not unlike the past, is that you've always had the ability to send us a draft for review before the deadline. There's a utility in the application where you can actually move a draft of your application to both your board members or your colleagues, and also to either Erica or I. And we will give you some input or some feedback on your draft that you can then use. So there's a technical review period, which is March 8th through March 19th. And so we're happy to look over what you've written as a courtesy. But the utility allows you to email to 10 people simultaneously to move the draft around. Again, the deadline is the 26th of March. And then these are the 3 panels again. And then there is, as normal, an appeals process for each of those. It's normally 2 weeks after the panel review. And again, the project implementation period is October 1st of 21 through September 30th of 22. Okay. Again, the summary of the changes. The score is not based on a 100-point rating scale. And then you'll also notice in the application that there is no specific question or response that is directly related to any specific program criteria. So unlike the past, a question might have had 5 points for this criteria or 8 points for this criteria, etc. Each question does not have a point value or weight. So the reviewers are going to be evaluating on the overall quality of the proposal in relation to the program criteria. And then the format of the application this year is designed so that the attachments are embedded within different pages or sections of the application as you're moving through it. They're not gathered at the final page of the application template, so there'll be uploads that will occur intermittently throughout the application. And some of the biographies that you might have attached in the past are actually data fields or narratives that you'll be inputting the information. The application will become the basis of your FY22 grant agreement. So when you certify your application, it will serve as the representation to the division as the funded services and deliverables that you plan or hope to seek funding for. Our goal is to really limit the amount of revisions of the program description as we develop the contracts for next year. The contract will be much smaller, so it's going to be relying on your application to speak as to the fundable deliverables. And then the other change this coming year, or this coming spring rather, is that unlike in the past, as a rule, statements or questions or discussions between panelists and grantees are not going to be permitted during or after the panel meeting. So the discussion will be between the staff and the panel. And then following the meeting, applicants will be provided a summary of the panelists' comments and scores with suggestions resulting from the discussion. So you are welcome to attend the meeting, but there will be no discourse or dialogue with the panel. And again, the 3 panels, depending on the funding level. So those of you that have applied in the past through the Cultural Tourism Program, CTP, or the Regional Investment Program, RINB, or have come in the Cultural Festival Program, CFP, and or Broward municipalities, this is the program that you'll be applying for. So projects for municipalities, state government agencies, or political subdivisions have to be located in Broward County. And then, again, it's only 1 application cycle per year. So those of you that may have come under the CIP program, where there were multiple deadlines, or even if you're on the phone as an artist, that's a different category. But there'll only be but one application deadline for next year. As I mentioned earlier, the match levels are a function of the score of the ranking. So there's an inverse relationship between the score to the required match level that you're going to be obligated to provide. So we encourage you to select the appropriate request level accurately for your program or scale the project accordingly. It's important. So don't overestimate expenses or revenues. You know, we'd encourage you maybe to think more modestly about the size of the project. And then the eligibility requirements have to be met at the time of application deadline. I mentioned earlier about the technical review. Again, the functionality of the form allows you to email a draft to either us and or others simultaneously. And then as normal, the division or staff will provide a staff review, technical review of the application for completeness, guidelines and policies. Incomplete applications will not be forwarded for the review panel. And so now the application portal or template will preclude you from submitting an incomplete application. A number of the fields and attachments are required. So if you inadvertently forget to answer a question or accidentally forget to upload an attachment, the form will prevent you from submitting the application completely until you make those corrections. And it's the peer panelists who actually will be making the aesthetic or artistic decisions about your proposal. In other words, they're doing the qualitative review. I talked about the rating system. And again, the funding approval, again, the panel can only but make recommendations. They're going to be sending along their decisions onto the Cultural Council for consideration, and they're the ones that will confirm or either alter the recommendations that make their way onto the County Commission for final approval. Again, if you're a first-time applicant to this program, you'll come in at the $5,000 grant tier category. And here's another representation of that chart. So you can start rehearsing the potential match requirements. Again, there is an appeals process. If you so wish to, it's 2 weeks after the conclusion of the panel. Now, denial of an award or dissatisfaction with a rating or new information not originally included in the application are not considered sufficient grounds for an appeal. So there really needs to be a genuine reason for the appeal, whether it was a misstatement of fact that occurred during the meeting or some fault by the panel. So some key tips about managing the award. If you are successful, you'll be notified in writing from the division. Normally this will be after the council has made their final recommendations. Now the project reporting is going to be a little bit more demanding or more rigorous than it has been in the past. Our goal next year is to move away from reimbursements, but be able to release the funds initially up front once your agreement has been executed. But the trade-off is that in completing the project report at the end of the project, you're going to have to be providing us with paid invoices or paid invoices. In other words, documentation accounting for how the funds are actually used. In other words, how did you spend the money and how did you spend your match? So it's important to note that you're going to have to start assembling this documentation as you're moving through the project. And failing to submit this material completely might negatively impact your ability to receive future funding as well. So proving or documenting your actual expenses are important, and I'll show you that in a minute in the application process. If you are funded, as normal, you're going to have to attribute the county as your funder, both in terms of a logo, and there's an attribution statement that you need to put in your marketing materials and or your website. Please also do remember to submit your events or programs to artscalendar.com so that your events receive more internet attention or a higher SEO. All right. And then again, the types of media files are pretty broad, but do make the movies fairly small, please. Now, as normal, the application itself is password protected, so a separate password will be provided to eligible applicants, and we'll be sending that script to you by email. That will come from the division staff, and only eligible organizations for the program support category will be sent that password. So this is just a quick view of what if you haven't already seen this, this is what the website for the division, the funding programs look like now. If you go to broward.org/arts, click on funding and the blue ribbon, you'll see these three tiles. The one on the left is program support, and if you drill into that tile, there'll be a landing page specific to the project support grant. Notice the manuals on the right, and then the onboarding buttons are below. And you'll be clicking the Start New Application button. That will inaugurate the template. You only need to do that but once, and then it'll store in your profile. And then you need not have to do the writing in one sitting. You can work on it, save it, close it, and come back another day. And then when you do, you'll click on the second button, Resume My Application, and it'll take you back to your profile, and you can pick up where you left off. So start here, and when you resume, come back here, In Progress Applications. And this is also where you'll find your project reports, any of you who have applied before in the past, your application histories are also stored there. It's like your library, so you can review previously submitted materials. So again, this is just going to be a quick review of the questions that you're going to be expected to provide in the application. Each time you save and close, a draft will be sent to you in your email inbox as a backup. So the first page is, normal background, organization name, mission statement, the CEO, and also who is the primary contact. That could be a development director or a project administrator. And then there'll be a drop-down where you'll be asked to provide the Broward County Commission district that relates to your corporate address. And later in the application, you'll do the same thing, but for the venues where your performances are going to be occurring, and those might be different. And embedded in the application itself will be a hyperlink. It's a GIS mapping tool. And when you click on that, so if you don't know your commission district, if you click on the mapping tool and type in your address, a little box or pop-up window will occur and it'll say your address is in Commissioner District number 3 or Commissioner District number 7. And so that's just a handy utility in the application. So you'll be providing us the commission district for your company address. And then there's going to be a drop-down field where you select the funding level. FEIN number, tax registration date, fiscal year start, ending date rather, DUNS number. If you don't already have one, please do get one from Dun & Bradstreet. This is how we aggregate the number of cultural businesses in Broward County. And then there's a drop-down feature where you have the ability to select up to 5 artistic disciplines, because some of you are multidisciplinary. And then there's another drop-down for project development. Again, is it new, continuing, existing? So, is it a first-time project in development? Continuation of an existing program, reoccurring project. You've been at it for a long time. And then at the bottom of that same page will be just a quick thumbnail of expenses and revenues. Currently completed, current fiscal, next. And likewise for income, recently completed, current fiscal, and next. I'll talk more about the budgeting form when we get to that question in a minute. So here come the criteria. So the first one is artistic merit and quality of program. Project narrative description. So here you're going to be describing the overall project for which you're applying for funding, key dates, names, and descriptions. In this question, you'll describe the process used to choose the artists and programs, the work of art or services involved. In other words, who makes the decision, or what is the criteria that you use in assembling these programs, who's involved. Is there a curator? Is it an artistic director? Is there a committee? Before I came to the county, I used to be a presenter, so I always had to work with committees in making artistic choices. So tell us, or tell the reader, how are these programs designed, or how are they developed? And then a list of venues. You'll have, I think, 4 or 5 options, and provide the name of the venue and their address. And then by each venue, there's actually another drop-down feature where you're going to indicate the status of the venue. Is it confirmed or not confirmed? And then we'll ask you to provide a projected attendance for that venue. If you have only one, that's okay, but some of you I know perform in multiple venues throughout the county. And then, again, confirmed or not confirmed, projected attendance. Now here, there's another drop-down where you're going to be indicating the Broward County Commission district served for each venue. So as you did for the corporate address, there'll be another mapping tool that you can fire off in the application. You'll type in the address of the venue, and it will reveal the county commission district that that site is situated in. Now, if the venue itself is not available, there's a narrative question, or rather response. So if you answer the venue is not available or not confirmed, you can advise us further on the status. So is it under contract? Is it timing, scheduling, technical difficulties, unconfirmed? Let us know, or let the reader know where you are with the securing of the venues. And then for all those different projected attendance figures, there's a button at the bottom. It's a keypad icon, which you can click on it, and it will auto-calculate the total audience for all the different venues. And the next question is the biographies of the professional artistic services outside professional. Now, this is not the staff of the organization. These are the creatives who you are hiring with the grant funding to deliver the programming. So this could be conductors or curators or dance masters or composers or videographers, filmmakers, painters, authors, actors, singers, musicians, teachers, etc. So it's here you're going to be inputting their biography information in the template. So this is not what used to be attachments. You're going to be putting the bios into a narrative field. And then by each of those biographies, you're going to be indicating the engagement status. Is the artist or performer confirmed or not confirmed? Don't list any irregular administrative personnel here. That's a question that you'll be responding to later. And then the attachment related to the artistic merit and quality. Here, you'll be uploading the support material for the creative artists involved in the project. Pictures, videos. Try not to use promotional materials. Maybe from the agent may not be the best. But do limit the length of the video or the pictures. Okay, second criteria, question. Number of artists that are going to be employed. Enter the number for each category. Are they Broward resident artists? Are they non-Broward resident? That could be maybe living in contiguous counties, artists living outside of the Tri-County area, maybe in other parts of Florida, out of state, maybe international. And then likewise, there's another button, keypad icon. If you click on that, it will aggregate the total number of artists. The question next is describe the need for the programming within the county and within the specific community the programming is taking place. Next question, what makes your organization unique and best positioned to do this work? And why were the locations chosen? Why are you bringing those events to this particular venue? Next question, how does the proposed program add or enrich the cultural landscape or history of the county? And then the next question is describing your core audience. Where do they come from? Are they local, regional, maybe out of state? And then what methods do you use to track or survey these audiences? And then not unlike previous applications or under that civic engagement category, we asked you to talk about how is your organization working to expand its core audience to attract new audiences, and what are those efforts? And then does your organization work to reach underserved or unrepresented audiences? And if so, describe those efforts. So you're telling us, do you know who your audiences are now? And then these other questions are, where will your future audiences come from? Now, a new question is community benefit. The Broward County Commission has a series of goals, vision, and values, and then there's a hyperlink embedded in the application you can click on, and it will take you to that commissioner page where you can learn about those different initiatives. But there are two specific ones that we think that are a nexus to what we do here as a division. So these are the two you'll be asked. You can pick one or both. Does your program provide or support diverse artistic, cultural, educational, and historical amenities and programs that contribute to a vibrant, multicultural, and economically viable community? Or the other one could be, does your work improve the access to business development, educational, cultural, and recreational opportunities and amenities to the economically disadvantaged? So there'll be a checkoff or a yes, no for each of these. There's no wrong or right answer, but there is then an input field or a question regarding then describe how does your work or how does your organization address these different vision goals and values. And then the associated attachments to this section are letters of support from community partners or elected officials. If there are any significant resources or in-kind resources donated, things like venues or, get a letter from the partner affirming those contributions. And then the other attachment can be testimonials from participants or audience members. So this is where you can upload information about people who have spoken well about your work. And then continuing on in the organizational capacity category, not unlike previous applications, you're going to be listing up to 3 organizational key goals and objectives for the coming period. Now remember that goals should be realized in timelines, budgets, and be realistic and quantifiable, measurable. So, it's good to talk about, we are going to increase something by X%, or we will increase something by X dollars, or we will increase audience size by 3%. So try to be concrete when you talk about these goals. And then how will you know that they've been achieved? In other words, what metrics are you going to use to evaluate these methods? So there's that SMART goals, measurable. And then here, you're going to list biographies of the key organizational personnel. So this is where you'll be providing the biographies of the administrative or artistic staff of your organization. In other words, who makes the programming decisions, who's involved with fundraising, who makes the strategic decision. And then the program budget. So there is a section on the budget narrative, and it will be here, you'll be providing in detail the revenue and expense aspects of your proposed project. So you'll be supporting what will be an Excel sheet that you're going to be uploading. So let's take a moment now, and I'm going to move to another file and show you what that form looks like. Okay, so it's a 2-page Excel sheet, and that they're interlinked to one another. So on the first page, it will be Broward expense only. So in this first column on the left, you'll be describing the project budget for Broward only and the fiscal year. And then there's a section on administrative overhead or indirect costs, programming and artistic production, this could be marketing, rent, printing, insurance, and then any other training or professional development expenses incurred here. And then in the middle column will be your presentation to us as to the allocation of the funds that you're requesting. So whether it's at 5K, 10, or 15K, it's in this column you're going to be allocating or making the distribution decisions as to how you intend to use those funds. And then the far left-hand column, you're actually going to be leaving this blank because we're going to be returning this form back to you, and it will be here in the project reporting process. You're going to be telling us how, in fact, the allocation was done, and if there were any variances from when you applied for the requested funding. So we have a comparison between the two. And this allocation or this report, shall we say, will have to be supported by your documented materials of proof of expenditure. And then the income side looks like this. So this is the earned income or revenues that the project will generate, whether it's ticket sales, contracted services, rental fees, advertising, or sponsorships. You'll be listing other grants, be they federal, state, or municipal. And this could be other contributed income, be it corporate, foundations, individuals other than your board members, monies raised through fundraisers or galas here. And then the column on the right, you'll be describing the status of these different resources or sources of revenue. So are they secured, pledged, pending, or planned? And then the summary of that will have either a surplus or a deficit. So design your budget carefully. Obviously, when you do this, and you're running your expenses and, the project costs $50,000 and the revenue is only $30,000, you're going to have a deficit. So, ideally it would balance. It's okay to have a surplus, but you shouldn't be losing money by running the project. Okay. So what we mean in that attachment section, notice it says under the expense, it's only those first two columns, the proposed project budget and the allocation, that you need to concern yourself with. The actual up to projected, you're going to leave blank until you actually do the project report at the end. And then the organizational capacity section continues, where you're going to give us an organizational history, past success, awards, and recognitions. How will this program be marketed? This is your marketing strategy. And then the list of number of organizational staff, board, and volunteers, just a number only, a numeral, not a percentage. And then there'll be a field that will ask you a percentage of board members that contribute to the organization. This is not the dollar amount, so it maybe it's like 7.5 or 15.2, so it's just the percentage of your board members that contribute to your organization. And then you'll list for us the number of full-time, part-time, and contractual personnel. And then the attachments related to this section, you'll be uploading your most recent board-approved budget. And then financial statements, be they a statement of activities, a profit and loss statement, or a statement of financial position, which could be your balance sheet, listing assets and liabilities. So there is not a prescribed format other than that program budget that I showed you earlier. These are going to be source materials from your organization. And then the last question, ADA compliance. Remember that please do select venues that are ADA compliant. And there'll be a series of questions that you'll need to ask, or rather respond to, in the affirmative. And then by certifying that you're not going to be unlawfully discriminating against any person based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, political affiliation, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, pregnancy, veteran status, or any other unlawfully discriminatory basis during the performance of any programming, event, or operation for which county funds are awarded pursuant to this application. So please do make your programs available to everyone. And then you'll be certifying this. As I mentioned earlier, the grant application is going to be serving as the basis of your grant agreement. So be realistic in the delivery of this proposal. And then, as I mentioned before, you can always save and close and come back later as you work on your application. Store a draft of your application. And then just click on Resume Application, and we'll bring you back to your profile. When you're ready, you click on the tab called Review My Application, and this will take you to a review screen. And we'll basically move the entire proposal to like a proofreading stage, where it will identify any missing attachments or missing questions that you might have inadvertently overlooked. And once you have fixed any of the errors and clicked Update, save your changes, then the submission button or other will appear, and that will be your cue to submit the application. Okay, so that's a brief run-through of the overview of the questions that you're going to be encountering. Some are new, some are questions that you've had or been answering before in the past. So I think, Erica, this time we'd welcome any questions, or maybe some groups or people can unmute if they'd like, and we can entertain any questions from the group tonight.
Or you can ask a question in the chat box, or feel free to unmute yourself and voice your question.
Hi there, this is Larry Fields from Fantasy Theater. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I believe this question was already answered, but I just want to make sure. So as it relates to eligibility, for those of us who are organizations who have been working with Broward before, we do not need to take any steps for to determine eligibility. That's just for the new organizations. That's what I understood. I just want to make sure I have that correct.
That's right. I mean, the eligibility for us is because if in fact we're entertaining any new applicants that are people that are unknown to us, it's just a way for us to be able to make certain that we're not fielding applications from Chicago or from California or from different states. Or so there may be applications or applicants who are prospective applicants, so we say, who are looking for funding. And so before they go through the rigor of applying through a full application, we like to do the eligibility step. But no, Larry, your organization has obviously been funded over the years in the past, and so you're currently eligible.
All right. Well, thank you for that clarification. I don't have any other questions. Just, great job to everybody putting this together. Thank you. It's been very informative.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Roger Wilson from Wilton Art. I do have a couple questions. I'm a new kid on the block to this, so thank you for this, putting these programs together, this seminar, and this education is helpful, very helpful. You mentioned in your presentation that a rating of 4 is rare, which would imply, I think, that the more matching funds would be required with most of the approved applications. What I was wondering about is, you also said your intention is to release funds soon in the process. And what I would like to know is if in spite of our best efforts that we are unable to achieve the match that's a minimum required match, if funds are already released to us, what would happen in that situation?
Yeah, it's rather problematic, because where this comes out in the end is that when you're actually completing the project reporting and you're incapable of being able to demonstrate how the funds were actually utilized correctly and the match is not there, then the organization runs the risk of not being funded in the future, or they might be debarred from receiving funding in the future. So we understand that that's a consequence, or one of the downsides of releasing the money up front is that there may be instances, hopefully not, but that their organizations don't quite hit the match requirement, or genuinely never had the funds in the first place, or the fundraising falls short in order to meet the match level. So the way to avoid that, or to avert that problem, is we suggest scaling or designing a project that is maybe on the smaller side, whether it's a $5,000 or $10,000 project, something that you have the match, or you're confident that the match is well in hand now, so that you're not overestimating or overextending yourself when you implement the project in the future. So I would be conservative in your budgeting and your forecasting in terms of fundraising and ticket sales. I mean, it doesn't really impress the panel if you say we're going to sell out the event. Not every concert or not every event sells out every ticket in the house, and not every fundraising campaign hits 100%. So it's or you reach a maximum ticket revenue or something like that. So I would caution you and design your program budget more conservatively, so that you know you can actually meet the match regardless of whatever score you receive. So if you were to score, say, in the mid threes, or heaven forbid, maybe in the high twos, and the match requirement was fairly high, that you in fact have that match secured now. So
Sure, that makes sense. Just a point of clarification. I mean, we've been very fortunate. We've had a great track record in raising all the funds that are required when we launch a project. So we've had a very good track record in fundraising. And I understand that guidance you've just offered, and that's a reasonable way to look at it. My other question is, in the categories judged, there are 3 categories. And while you said there are no longer questions that have specific weighting, do the categories judged, the 3 categories, have any particular ratings? Any particular weighting? I'm sorry, weighting.
No, it's different from the past. I mean, some of you who've applied to us in the different format of the grant program, we actually would have points or levels assigned to each sub-criteria. So, there were like 16 or 17 sub-criteria that all added up to 100 points. And then as you were completing the application in the past, you would see the points noted next to each criteria. So that is not the case now. So there is no nexus between the criteria and any one specific question. So no question is 10 points, or no question is 8 points or 7 points. The reviewers or the panel will be looking at the totality of the entire application in order to make their rating.
Yes. No, I understood that, but I thought you had sort of condensed things down to 3 key areas that would be judged.
Oh yeah, well, not unlike previous years, there is a criteria. There's 3 criteria for this program, as there were 3 criteria in the past.
Yeah.
So these are and then the various questions. There's not a specific. How should I say this? There's a narrative field regarding where you're going to talk about the quality of your program, which might address this criteria.
Yes.
But the questions are not organized like this specifically.
Uh-huh.
You're going to be addressing these concepts through the responses that you're providing to those different questions, which I just showed you. But you're not going to see these specific questions outlined in the application per se.
Yes, okay.
So it's a little bit different. It's, the reader's going to look at all of it, and then they'll base their rating on your responses. There's a couple new questions. Some of them are variations of ones that you've seen before. So that's why we wanted to start talking about these questions tonight, so that you have, it's now 2.5 months away from the deadline. So we wanted to get you thinking about the responses to that. And that, again, is also the reason for the technical review, where you have the ability to send us a draft, because we want to be, if you want us to read through your draft proposal, we're happy to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I appreciate those answers. Thanks much.
Sure. Normally in different application workshops, we have a number of source or resource materials, background reading, that we can also send along. We didn't want to elaborate too much of that on tonight because we're kind of online, but maybe some of you might remember, and when we're kind of in an in-person setting, we usually have a series of other readings or background resources that strengthen, or concept reading, if you will, that address some of these different questions, like how to develop an artistic philosophy, or how to develop a programmatic philosophy, so that you can articulate to the reader, your art form. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is that don't assume that the readers know everything about visual arts or music or dance, or they may not know about everything about arts education, or may not be familiar with festivals. You know, so in the application, sometimes in the narrative sections, I always say, you know, take a few sentences maybe to give some context or background about the work that you do. Maybe an organization or a reader may not know too much about theater, you know, so it might be important to give them some background about the work that you're doing or the art form that you're presenting, because, you know, they're very knowledgeable, but they may not be all experts in each and every discipline that they're reading.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, feel free to email Jim or myself if you think of anything along the way. And once again, this recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you need to refresh your memory, you know, feel free to email us and we'll send you the link. So once again, thank you for attending the Program Support Application Workshop, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.